For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Political analyst Aubrey Machiki joins me to discuss leadership battles within the ANC. The ANC in Gauteng has just completed its conference and in a number of ways appears to be antagonistic towards the leadership of President Jacob Zuma. What is your reading of how this situation will play out?
Well, we should not be surprised given the fact that in the lead up to the Mangaung conference in 2012, Gauteng, particularly its leaders, such as Paul Mashatile, were not behind the re-election of Jacob Zuma. And last year, as we're approaching the elections, they argued that it must be former President Thabo Mbeki who must be the face of the ANC election campaign, not Jacob Zuma, because according to the polling they had done, the image crisis he faced would be a liability to the to the ANC in Gauteng. What has happened since then, of course, is that we've had the election, and the ANC dropped from 64.04% in 2009 to 53.5% this time. And Gauteng has been quite candid about the reasons behind the erosion in electoral support. They have stated quite clearly that it's because of e-tolling, that the middle class in particular has abandoned the ANC. What they are not saying, which I think is implied, is that Gauteng suffered collateral damage because of the Zuma factor. But that is not something they are going to say directly, because it has implications for the relationship between the ANC in Gauteng and the ANC at a national level. But what is very clear is that the ANC in Gauteng and the ANC nationally are on a collision course.
Do you think that the ANC is at risk of losing Gauteng? Could its support drop below 50% of votes in the province?
Well, the ANC's own internal research in Gauteng suggests that unless the ANC reconnects with those voters who abandoned it, particularly the middle class, in the May election, it may lose Gauteng within 2 elections. And so the real challenge facing the ANC in Gauteng with regard to the citizens of this province is that of reconnecting with its support base. Internally within the ANC, if this collision course is about the emergence of a different set of values and a different set of leaders at national level, the challenge facing the ANC in Gauteng is to be behind the creation of a new majority in the ANC as a whole. But even if the ANC loses Gauteng, let's say in 2019, the ANC may still be in government if they can persuade a party such as the Economic Freedom Fighters to be in coalition with them. So the fact that the ANC may lose Gauteng in 2019 does not mean that they'll be locked out of power necessarily.
Do you think that the ANC in Gauteng is trying to win over the support it lost during the previous elections by launching the advisory panel on e-tolls?
Absolutely. I think the ANC has not shied away from the reason behind their re-evaluation of e-tolling and the decision at their provincial conference to demand that e-tolling in its current form should be scrapped. It's clearly aimed at reconnecting with voters in Gauteng, particularly the middle class and particularly the black middle class. Now, what is interesting for me is that while the ANC in the province and the ANC nationally may be on opposite sides of the e-tolling argument, is that if the ANC in Gauteng succeeds by opposing the national government on e-tolling to reconnect with those voters it lost in May, that might benefit the ANC as a whole, which means actually out of this twist between Gauteng and ANC nationally, lies the possibility of an ANC at a national level that does much better than it did in the May election.
You mentioned that President Zuma has rendered himself vulnerable to the perception that he will go only to those provinces that are loyal to him. If this was the case, what impact do you think this will have on the ANC going forward?
Well, I think it is unfortunate that the president didn't see it fit to attend the ANC conference in the province. He may argue, those around him may argue that it was because of his schedule. But since when has an ANC president not been able to schedule in advance his attendance of an ANC provincial conference? And I think very few at that conference and very few in this province believe that the president could not attend the conference because of scheduling problems. I suspect that the majority of people are maybe gravitating towards the perception that he is the president of only those ANC members who like him, and he's not the president of ANC members who don't like him, and that is why he did not come to Gauteng. And what is disappointing about that, if it is true indeed, is that would amount to a serious lapse in leadership, because a good leader must transcend the ill feelings of those around him, including those within his party.
You suggest that what is required is pragmatic and wise leadership, capable of promoting billions upon billions of rand of private sector investment. Do you think it will be possible for the ANC to provide such leadership?
You know, my concern is this. It seems the global economy is slowing down. And if that's the future of the global economy in the foreseeable future, that will have a negative impact on a South African economy that is experiencing sluggish growth. Now, in order for South Africa to get out of the current economic quagmire, you do need higher levels of both public sector and private sector investment, which cannot happen as long as the deficit of trust between the ANC government and the private sector continues. Unfortunately, that deficit in trust has mutated into a crisis of confidence at two levels. At an economic level, the private sector is sitting on billions upon billions that it is not investing in the economy because it no longer has confidence in the capacity of the ANC government to provide both technical and thought leadership with regard to getting out of the current economic crisis. At a political level, there is an erosion of trust that is developing between the citizen and the government and the ruling party, and in particular, the president. And therefore, we are reaching a point where the ANC government may face a crisis of confidence both at an economic and political level.
That was political analyst Oprima Chikri speaking about the leadership battles within the ANC.